Hi, I'm Stephanie Zaharek. I'm the film critic for Time Magazine, and I am delighted to introduce to you the person whose film you just watched, Sofia Coppola.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I don't know if any of you have seen an earlier version of this same material. In 1971, Don Siegel made a very different version of The Beguiled, which is based on a 1966 novel by a writer named Thomas Colin. And Don Siegel's film starred Clint Eastwood, and it's a very different movie. So, Sofia, can you tell us what attracted you to this material in the first place?
Yeah, I thought it was such a kind of odd film and interesting premise in the 71 Don Siegel film. It's the same. It's except for it's from the point of view of the soldier entering this Southern girls' school and all these women. And I thought it was so interesting to tell the story of this group of women of different ages and them dealing with their desire and all from this kind of macho guy's point of view. So I found the book that was written from each female character's point of view, and I thought I would like to retell the same premise in a new version from their side of the story.
And it's the first time you've worked with Nicole Kidman, the third time you've worked with Kirsten Dunst, who you first worked with on your first feature in 1999, The Virgin Suicides, when she was very young. She was just a teenager. And it's the second time you've worked with Elle Fanning, who was so lovely in Somewhere. Can you talk about a little bit about the casting and how you...
Yeah. the subway during the Civil War. Yeah, I was excited about when I thought about making a new version that I love working with Kirsten. I thought she could play the teacher, and Elle, who I worked with when she was 11, now would be old enough to play the 17-year-old student. And I've always loved Nicole Kidman. I thought I would love to see her as this headmistress. So I was really inspired by getting together all these actresses that I love and to see them together, to work with them together. And sorry, we've had a long day. I'm trying to think. What was it like working with Kirsten? Yeah. I mean, I loved because I met Kirsten when she was 16 on Virgin Suicides, and she's so bubbly and full of life. And then to see her play a part that's so different for her, to be this repressed character, because Kirsten's very not at all like she's the opposite of that. So I think I always like to see actors playing an opposite role, and and to see her at this point of her life, because I worked with her when she was younger, and it was interesting to get to work with her at a different stage.
And interesting to work with these actresses and to kind of watch them grow up. Now you and Kirsten Dunst are, there's about 10 years age difference between you guys, I guess. So when you're working with a very young actress, that difference is very pronounced. And then when you're older, you kind of, I know you guys are like friends now. When I first met her, she was a kid, and now I feel like we're closer in age and can, talk about grown up things. We were when there's the sex scene with Colin, we're like, okay, we're not gonna chick it out, like we're gonna go for it. And we because on Virgin Suicides there's a scene with Trip Fontaine, and it was so embarrassing, and she was just a kid, and I didn't really want to. I don't know. It was just embarrassing for me to shoot it too, and so this time that was one of our goals. We were gonna be mature about our angry sex scene with the bodice ripping moment. And in the earlier film, it's if you haven't seen it, it will be very interesting, I think, for you to look at it after seeing this version. But the Clint Eastwood character is he's obviously a bad guy, and it's the very macho view of this material. But in your film, there's one moment that I just really, really love, and it's the moment where Nicole Kidman is washing Colin Farrell, and at one point she just looks at his hand, and it's this like really beautiful, tender, moment between the two of them. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what?
Oh, I'm glad you noticed that and all the tawdriness of the bathing scene. I think those moments always strike me that those kind of details that say so much, and I just thought what she's missing being like just the sort of the intimacy of looking at his hand and it's a man in such contrast to her, and just like all the potential of what she's missing in her life, so that that there's an emotional moment, and it's not just about her desire and her Christianity, but the kind of longing for some connection and intimacy. And I thought I was interested in the story because they're so isolated, these women cut off during wartime, and what it might have been like for them, and how he would affect them when he comes in and they haven't seen a man in years, and there's like the fun, all the sexual tension and the them dressing up for him, but also the touching side of them being so cut off.
And it's such a great detail too, because if you haven't actually seen a man in a long time, and you're sort of looking, and you're in this kind of pretty intimate situation, and you see the hand, and it's like you realize like a man's hand is like actually a very like beautiful kind of erotic thing, but in a very subtle way. So I love that moment. Tell us a little bit about how you found your way to Colin Farrell, because that character is so important as the only man in the film. He needs to be a little bit sympathetic, a lot sexy.
I spent a lot of time asking a lot of people who they thought was the hottest actor. My kids go to school in the neighborhood, and I would ask all the moms, and then I would ask like my gay male friends who they loved the best, and a lot of research went into that. And so, it was important that they had to believe that all these girls could fall for him, and who could handle them all. And I feel like it would have been insulting to the women to have just a dumb hunk, that we needed someone intelligent that could be crafty and really captivating. And when I met Colin, he's so charismatic and charming, and the Irish accent helps too. And in the book, he was an Irish immigrant, which gave him even more of a history. But I thought in the Don Siegel film, he's a bad guy right off the bat. They make it really clear, and there's flashbacks and voiceover. And this story, I wanted to tell the story from the women's point of view, so they're trying to figure him out, and I hope the audience goes along with them, trying to understand if they should trust him and wanting to, but maybe having hesitation, and seeing how he changes for each of the characters and how he relates to them each in a different way.
And I also want to ask you, your movies generally use a lot of pop music, and that's kind of almost a trademark of yours, but in this film is actually very quiet, and there's very little music until the very end. But it makes the sound design really pronounced, and the sound of the birds and the cicadas and the cannons booming in the background. Can you talk a little bit about some of the choices that you made?
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to create tension with this. I don't think I've ever done that before, so I was really thinking about the tension and wanting the audience to feel the tension of the house, and also like the long, slow, hot days in the South, and the sound of the nature, and what it would be like for them. And so that we just have these kind of low tones, but it's mostly hearing the nature and keeping it really stark to keep the tension, because music always kind of alleviates that, and to have a sense of the place with the cannons in the distance, and that they're really, there's nothing around except for nature outside in the distant war, but to really keep the tension. And I asked Phoenix to do some of there's a synthesizer kind of ominous tones to add tension in those areas, but to not have it be too prominent. And it was really interesting. The sound department said how this was really challenging for them, because usually you can hide a lot of things with modern sounds, and this we had to strip it down so much. And we were shooting in New Orleans, so there was traffic and modern day sounds, and to really have to strip that all down, but you couldn't hide it behind music or loud modern noises. So, but I liked the kind of contrast of the really lush visuals with a very stark sound.
And it's interesting, like you can even hear people's footsteps, like the floorboards creaking, and it just makes the whole experience seem really intimate, I think.
Oh, cool. I want to feel like you're there with them, but hopefully on edge a little bit. What might happen?
And I also wanted to ask you about the look of the film, because I think, when we look at a film like this and it's so beautiful, and unless you actually work in the film business, you often don't know how much it costs to make a film like this. And the reality is this film was shot at a plantation in Louisiana, and it's my understanding that you guys stayed at a Hampton Inn. Is that true?
Yeah, we were out, like an hour and a half outside of New Orleans in Napoleonville, next to like the Walmart, and even Nicole Kidman was staying at the Hampton Inn. Everyone was a good sport. It was fun. It was a low-budget movie. We shot it in 26 days, which is short to make a movie. So I'm really proud that everyone worked so hard to make it look lush and hopeful and beautiful of that time. And Philippe Lassorde is the cinematographer, and we did a lot of tests to test different kinds of candles to make it look like it was only lit with that, and also shooting in this real plantation outside of New Orleans, I think, adds so much atmosphere and the landscape there. And we shot on film, so I'm happy you saw it on a big-ish screen. Yeah, and but the look, of course, was. Important to set the stage, so that I wanted it to feel like this really feminine world, that when the man came in, it was really a contrast, and it didn't look like a threatening place. He felt like he was, kind of landed in a good spot with the lacy pillows, and then, and hopefully you don't know the shift that the story will take.
So next time I have to stay in a Hampton Inn, I'll think to myself, if it's good enough for Nicole Kidman, it's good enough for me. So why don't we take a few questions from the audience? You, right in front here.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I was wondering, what was the hardest scene for you to write? And also, was there anything that surprised you that you found in your edit?
Oh, that's a good question. What was the hardest scene to write? I don't know. For me, the hardest part was... I think the dialogue. I've never written that much dialogue, and how to make it feel naturalistic and in the period of that time, but not feel foreign for the audience. And what was the hardest part? Yeah, the hardest scene. I know it's hard to say, but for me, I think the challenge was how to do something in a genre, which I've never done, but still in my style, to try something a little bit different, and to really be thinking of the plot propelling the story, instead of, usually I'm more interested in the characters doing that, and to have so much dialogue, I guess. Is that the answer?
You in the center there.
Thank you. I was more interested actually in the motivations of Edwina and Martha's characters. I made the mistake of reading a review that sort of characterized Nicole Kidman's character as a maniac, and that the choices that she makes are like totally overblown, and that she sort of like loses her mind. And I thought that everything in the movie I thought that everything in the movie that the two of them went through, it was very understandable to me, the way that they handled the situation. And I was just wondering, as a director, with those kind of motivations, do you leave that up to the actors, or is that something that you would have discussed with them? Because I think it's really complex and fascinating the way that the two of them handle this situation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we talked about their characters and kind of their background, and then Nicole and Kirsten did their own preparation, to make it connect with them personally. So I know Nicole. I didn't want the story so melodramatic. I didn't want it to turn campy. I wanted it to be, fun and funny, but also connected to something real. And I remember Nicole, just when she started playing that part, she saw that character as really protecting these girls, and she was in charge of these girls that had been left behind, and very maternal. And I think it made her human, at how she's conflicted. And Kirsten also, she's conflicted between being a good example and a kind person, but then he's an enemy. And and he shouldn't be there. So we talked about the situation and the character's background, and then they worked on their own way to connect with them.
Thank you.
Thanks again for showing your film. I really loved it. She pretty much asked the question I was going to ask, which was related to sound design. Because, a lot of the time when I think about your work, I think about emphatic musical cues. And I really loved how in this, you did so much with the sound effects, like the thump of the leg, hitting the hole they dug.
There's a lot of discussion of how loud to make the thump when it goes in the grave.
Perfect. And, the clatter of Kirsten Dunst's buttons as she got her dress ripped. But, yeah, I was just
Thank you.
I thought the sound design was amazing. And especially at the beginning, the juxtaposition between, the nature sounds on the high end and the distant battle sounds on the low end. It was just it was awesome.
Oh,
and
cool. Thank you.
But I guess I'll just ask a dumb question. Colin Farrell without the leg, how you do that? Was it a body double every time?
It was really old-fashioned, low budget, him just. It's good. He does yoga, so that was lucky that he's limber, and he just tucked his leg down. And then we had a little bit of visual effects help. And we had a one-legged double for the chase scene at one point.
Yeah, I thought it was really hard to tell.
Oh, cool! Yeah. Thank you. It's probably my first foray into visual effects. So, yeah, but it was pretty basic. He was just had it tied up most of the time. Okay, but the magic of movies. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you thought it looked real.
Hi. First, I just wanted to say, you're such an inspiration to me and all the other
Thank
young
you.
women going into film. Yeah.
Thank you. That's so nice.
I go to NYU Tisch, and, all we talk about, me and the other girls are, you just are such a big deal to us. My question...
So nice. Thank you.
Yeah. My question was, your writing process. What do you specifically do? Do you tell yourself, okay, every day I'm going to write one page, or are you more of, a long-term planner, or just how do you go into it?
Oh, I find writing the hardest part, and I procrastinate a lot, and it's really hard to be disciplined. And my friend Tamara Jenkins, who's a writer, told me about a program called, I think it's called Freedom, where it cuts off your internet so you can't get distracted. And but I don't know, when I get into something with this, I went to the book and I started marking it up and then choosing what I wanted to keep and what I didn't want to include. And then I would, kind of rough it out and then start. I really like using Final Draft because as soon as you start working at Final Draft, it looks like a script, so it's really exciting. And then it makes you want to keep going, and I figure you just have to, get enough to just to get through it. So for me, adapting is easier than writing an original script because you don't know where you're going. On this, I have a basic idea and something to work from, but I don't think I know how many pages a day or how long it takes. I think once you kind of get excited about it, then I would get, excited to go back to it and get kind of obsessed with it. And I think my dad told me about always leave when it's a part that you like, so that you're excited to come back to it. Don't exhaust the good parts. So leave it apart when it's going well. Leave at that point so that you're looking forward to coming back to it, which I thought was a good advice. But I found writing hard, and the hardest part is, of course, you think it's dumb. I think don't read it too much when you're writing it. Just keep going forward, because if you start reading it, then you just think it's awful and you don't want to continue. So I try to just not look back and keep going forward until you're done, and then look through it.
Thank you.
Those are good tips.
Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Hi, wonderful film. Thank you so much. It's really great. My question is, I did see the Clint Eastwood film. I think it was 1971. And my question is, could you talk a little bit about what it's like to do, I don't want to say a remake, but to make a film that's already been made? And how is that different from doing an original film or doing a direct adaptation from a book? Did you study or watch the 71 film, or did you try to ignore it? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. I tried to, after I saw it, I tried to forget about it, and I didn't watch it again until last week, which was really interesting after working on it for so long. But no, I really tried to forget about it, and everyone who worked on the film tried to just approach it as how we make a movie. And so I got the book and I adapted it, and I tried to just think about how I wanted to do it. And I was definitely affected by seeing it the first time, because there were so many things that I wanted to do differently, and and I was focused on that. But then I tried to just focus on the characters and read more about their backstories and write a new script with just approaching it the way that I want to tell the story, and trying to think of things from my life to make it personal, to connect the characters, and so that I can relate to the characters.
It's a fantastic movie, and there's one particular moment that seemed like a very tough nut to crack, and I'm going to have to watch the film just for this one moment.
Oh, wow, I'm so curious.
It's at the climactic dinner at the end, and what puzzled me was Edwina. She walks in almost triumphant, as if either to claim success or perhaps even shifting sides. At that point, I was very like, what's she going to do? And then what puzzled me was the exchange about the mushrooms, because obviously she wasn't there for the plotting, and it seemed really curious that when he handed her the mushrooms, she seemed eager to take some. But then when suggested, oh, you don't really like them, she was very quick to kind of be like, oh, no, I guess I don't, which seemed very peculiar. And it made me wonder, does she at that moment know something's up? Because when he dies, her reaction is also curious. And
I think she doesn't know what's going on. My impression is that she is planning on running away with him. They're out of there, and that's all. When she comes in, I think her triumph is that she doesn't have to be under Miss Martha's thumb anymore, and she's getting out of there, and she doesn't know what's going on. So I remember when we were shooting that scene that Kirsten was playing it all very confused about why are the girls being so weird? Everyone's acting strange. But I think she's caught up in her romantic thoughts, and she's already thinking about their life outside of the school, and so she's kind of a little bit spacey, and I mean, in that way, her head is in romantic thoughts, and so she doesn't know what they're planning, because they couldn't let her know because she would might stop them, so they have to do what's best for everyone.
And maybe she just really doesn't like mushrooms.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Thank you.
And let's see, there was somebody right next to yes, you, right there.
Hi. So there were a lot more comedic moments than I expected in the film, and I'm just wondering, was that intentional throughout the writing process, or did those kind of evolve because they were kind of an interesting way?
When I was writing it, I loved the whole premise because I thought it was it was fun and it could be funny, and I think all the kind of power shifts and dynamics between the women, and just coming from things in my life, and then imagining Nicole Kidman, I just thought she would bring kind of her twisted humor to it. So there were a lot of moments in the script that were funny to me, but then they really came out on set. But it wasn't like I didn't know it was funny, and then we got to set and all of a sudden found that. It was definitely the whole tone of it. I thought the whole premise, it's just so over the top, and they're also kind of bursting out of their tightly buttoned shirts with the idea of this man in their house. So the premise was funny to me, and then we really got into it on set. But then I think in the edit we had to control that it didn't become a camp fest.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. So thank you all for coming, and
thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
Sofia.
a lot.